I wanted to talk a little bit about web development and its process and how we go about putting together teams and what those teams might look like. And first I wanted to talk about some of the various roles that you might find on a large-scale project. In this we have the project manager. The project manager tends to be the person who's going to coordinate with all the individual members of the team. They're not going to necessarily know how to do everything that each individual member knows, but they're going to know a lot. I've got some different things on here about defining the scope and preventing scope creep when the project gets a lot larger than it needs to be. Maybe they're going to look at keeping it on target with budget as well as time. A lot of projects go way over on time and on money, and that's something that they're going to mitigate against. They're going to look at all these different things here and just make sure that things are running smoothly and working. And next we have the information architect, and these people are going to look at some of the site goals of the project, determining the functionality of the site, putting together site organization, navigation. They're going to work hand in hand with the project manager and a lot of the web developers. Next we have the UX designer, and that stands for the user experience designer. And one thing to remember, it's important to understand that UX is not the same thing as what a graphic designer would do, right? Or working on the user interface. You can see here that they're going to focus more on how the user feels as they move through the user experience of said application or website. You can see how they're going to focus on doing research and wireframing things out rather than sketching or prototyping and having that visual aspect. But that's some of the differences between the user experience designer over a user interface design. So moving along, we have the marketing representative, and that's really what it sounds like. They're going to be the person, once the project launches, they're going to be trying to market it, find ways of doing that offline as well as online, and spreading the word. The copywriter is going to be preparing and evaluating the different copy, taking material from other locations, brochures, things like that that they might use on the website. The editor definitely is going to work with the copywriter to check the text and make sure everything's clean. That's one of the big problems a lot of websites have, is it's never really looked over thoroughly. The content manager down below is definitely going to be looking at what content strategically they can put on the site that's going to help out and help the website be as successful as possible. The graphic designer is really the pretty committee. They're going to be going through and building up what these graphics are going to look like, things like that. And the web designer works a lot hand in hand with them as far as building the front end of the website out. Now the front end web developer and the web designer often are kind of one and the same. And a web developer and a back-end developer are often the same as well, but not always the case. I did pull up a few other things on here I wanted to show you guys. So first off, I think this probably closely matches what a project manager is going to do, but you can see here the median pay in 2019 was $146,000 per year. That's quite a bit. But these guys are going to be, more the managerial level. But I think a project manager falls underneath this as I'm kind of looking down through this somewhat. You can see, it is growing 11% as a job outlook. You can see in the next, from 2018 to 2028, in that decade, the employment change that's needed. Graphic designers, you can see here, they're going to make an average of $52,000 a year. And it is a slower growth. There's not as much demand for this. But if you do want to gain some skills, we got on here web developers, but as I'm looking down here, design and create websites, I think this probably falls more into a front-end web developer role here. But you can see their average pay is $73,000 a year with a 13% increase over the next 10 years, and that's going to definitely help out. If you want to go more back end right here and focus more on the development side of things, I think that falls a little bit more into a software developer role. But you can see their pay is a lot higher at $105,000. And these stats again are coming from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. So this is really what it is. These are the real numbers that we're seeing, and this is pretty awesome because we see a 21% increase over up until 2028. So there's going to be a huge demand for this. And when you see a big demand and it's not filled, that pay often goes up. So that could go up quite a bit as well. Moving on a little bit more, we have some other roles here of a database administrator. These guys are going to be the ones that are taking data needed for the site to run, putting it in a database, normalizing that, making sure things are running smoothly. We can see they're going to make roughly about $93,000, $94,000 a year. And last but not least was the network administrator, and they're going to be making sure that the servers are running well, making sure hardware and software and whatnot's running appropriately. They're averaging at $83,000 a year. So we have all these different roles that we can see as far as building a project together. And for the most part, as students, as we put together our first simple websites, we're kind of taking on all these roles. We're developing what it's going to look like. We're designing it graphically. We're writing content. We can market it ourselves, things like that. And that's what's kind of cool about the web is you can launch this stuff out of your garage if you want to and start your own business that way. But if you do get into a large company, you do need to take on these other roles. And finding people to fill these roles can sometimes be a little difficult. So a couple things you need to first think of when finding these people is look at their experience that they have. What did they work in before? Look at their portfolio of other websites and applications they've built. Do they have any formal education? Have they graduated with a software developer background? Or do they have any kind of industry certifications and things like that? You may want to consider even outsourcing. A site like Upwork.com is an option you can look at. Picking people that maybe you want to develop for WordPress or a full stack developer, and they have their prices on what they're going to charge here. And typically you're going to spend around $70 to maybe $90 on average to pick one of these guys up as a developer. And yourselves, as you guys get good, you can go out there and do the same thing online here as well if you wanted to. But there's nothing saying that you couldn't go do that. But there are definitely problems doing this. Typically, you pick these people up short term, and finding them again to work on the project can be difficult. Sometimes there's problems where you might pick somebody up worldwide because they're a lot less expensive, and you might have some language barrier problems or some creativity problems. Often they're not in it to see your application succeed, but they're in it just to get a paycheck and finish up whatever you want them to do. So that's another thing you have to keep in consideration as you're working with these individuals. So there's a lot of pros and cons as far as outsourcing go. Price can be a lot better, but there's problems not having them in-house and having them have the long-term kind of vision. But it's important to realize what really goes into these large-scale projects, and if you want to launch something like that for yourself or you're part of it, you can kind of see how you might fit into all of that.